Cool. Well, I'm going to get us warmed up with some very small-scale lore. So, recently, right, we hopped on the alpha. A whole bunch of people mentioned the first one. So, the question is... it seems the first ones might have made the Shadowlands, or at least a very big bunch of dudes. So, where do you think they might fit into that cosmology chart that you guys have been teasing us with for so very long?
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
I mean... Who made the Titans? The Titans there to begin with? Who created all of what we're seeing? What is the hierarchy of power in the Warcraft universe?
He's not going to answer a question. He's just going to ask more questions to elicit more interest rather than actually answering the question.
I think what we are seeing... So the Titans that we've dealt with in... past Warcraft expansions up to now, as we saw face-to-face at the end of Legion, that was, the pantheon of order that we've seen placed on the cosmology. As we go to the Shadowlands, what we'll be learning is that there is a pantheon of death. And if you think of people like, or beings like the Archon in Bastion, Denathrius in Revendreth...
Are they the
Winter
pantheon?
Queen, these are effectively analogous to the Titans that we know. In our world that we have interacted with, but they are the pantheon of death. And the question is, how does the jailer fit into this? How does the arbiter fit into this? Those are things we're going to learn.
That actually makes a lot of sense. So, like, this is one thing I was wondering about, right? Is that it is the pantheon of death, is it people that are, like, above the arbiter and Denathrius, or is it the actual, those guys that are the pantheon? And so it looks like, those guys just are the pantheon. That's good. Acting like war matters, it does.
Okay, that is... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I know. That's just a little nugget. And then, is there some higher structure above and beyond that? Those are good questions. I think that's something we want to begin to delve into. Because one of the natural questions that many people asked, really 3 years ago now, hey, we just dealt with Titans. We just faced off against a manifestation of Sargeras. Where do we go from here? Well, that's something we need to start exploring.
Nice. Yeah, I've got the feeling Steve's been...
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of the way that I look at it, too. I mean, like, how the hell is it going to be... How the hell can you compete with that after you've already done Sargeras? You know what I mean?
Running around the office with that cosmology chart, really trying to go big. I suppose I've got a similar one. So, we've got this pantheon of order that we know about, and one of them just so happens to have the title of Lifebinder. Now, if Azeroth is a prison, as Sylvanas claims that it is, could a Lifebinder have had anything to do with that?
I mean, anything is possible, though that
anything
feels
is
like,
possible.
Sometimes they're just artful terms that sound cool that are chosen long ago before we dreamed up any of these stories, so I wouldn't necessarily read too much into all of that. Though, one interesting facet of Bolvar, who's going to play a prominent role, sort of a bridge between two worlds, is that he's in the unique position of being someone who was seared by the flames of the Lifebinder, but has also worn the Helm of Domination.
What the fuck does that mean?
An anchor into one realm while also having vision and insight into the other. So that kind of
See, I don't understand why is it meaningful that Bolvar got set on fire? Like, Alexstrasza burned a bunch of other people. It's not like this is some kind of fucking, ancient ritual where Bolvar, oh my god, wow, he's been seared by the flames. They just lit him on fire. Oh, wow. Life and death? But it's not life and death. Like, it's just Alexstrasza, and it wasn't even Alexstrasza. It was the other Red Drakes. I think Alexstrasza might have been there. I don't remember. Like, I don't know. I don't think it wasn't really a big deal. Yet he survived the burn? Yeah, because he's fucking Bolvar.
It's in a unique situation.
Jackie, thanks for 5 subs. I appreciate that, man.
I suppose on that, it's, it's getting us close to close to souls and Anima, and we've all been talking about Anima for quite a bit. So we know that Anima is like this accrued power within a soul, right? So your Anima grows, you die, you go to the Shadowlands, it's slurped up into some sort of realm where it's used. So we know almost all of this process.
Yeah.
But there's one question that's been teasing us for a long time in the office, and that is, where does the Anima come from? Does it pop into the material realm like the Titans seemingly did, or is it perhaps from some sort of lifelands?
Oh, where does Anima come from? That's a good question.
That's the rules of existence, really. I mean, where does gravity come from? How do magnets work? These are the questions that puzzle us.
Fucking miracles, man. What do you mean, Ian? Like, we know how magnets work. It's fucking miracles. Everybody knows that. Come on.
This is just how life energy, this is just how a soul is formed, and the energy that accrues over the course of that life's experience and deeds. Now, who put all these rules in motion? Who is the clockmaker behind it all? Again, there are bigger questions that we will continue to delve into over many years to come as we unravel the way the Warcraft universe is assembled. But I don't know that we're going to be specifically trying to answer that question within the Shadowlands.
Cool. Yeah, I mean,
what he's saying is that they probably have never thought of that question. And so, like, that's probably questions never even crossed Ian's mind. You know, he's like, I don't know. How do magnets work?
It's interesting seeing the lore grow. With the first Night Warrior, you know, we just heard Steve talk about there being Night Warriors from other worlds, kind of suggesting that Elune is like more than just this Azeroth moon god, right? It's like has been called a true deity before, and I guess that did get us feeling well. Number one, this really seems to be a part of the broader plan that's going on with maybe the first ones and making that lore bigger, maybe zooming us out on that cosmology chart.
That's cool.
But we did notice as well, ANR was hiding out on Elunaria, and that planet, that seems like a decently targeted name for it.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Perhaps.
All right, man. These questions, like, Ian is so... Perhaps. Hey. How do magnets work? Perhaps. You know, like... Oh, my God.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and I think when it comes to the Night Warrior and the nature of... I think there'll be some light shed on these interactions and relationships in the story of Ardenweald, and particularly in the max level Covenant campaign of the Night Fae, for those who choose that Covenant. Tyrande is certainly going into the Shadowlands. She has she is definitely consumed with a desire for vengeance.
Yeah, she's crazy.
And that hasn't gone away just because some treaty got signed at the end of Battle for Azeroth. And in the course of that, we'll be learning a bit about the nature of what the Night Warrior is, what that means. But I don't want to get ahead of the story that is yet to be told.
Cool. So I think there's one I'd be remiss.
I thought this whole, like, I'm gonna be honest, guys. I thought that whole, like, Tyrande being the Night Warrior shit, I thought that was fucking stupid. Like, I mean, I get that, like, you know, they're trying to make it special and everything like that, and, you know, make her different. But I read that and I'm like, oh, you're the Night Warrior? Okay, bro. Like, yeah, sure, whatever. I don't know. It's just, it's like she just went emo. Like, that's what it was. She literally fucking started wearing black eyeshadow because of the tree getting burned down. Like, I get it, but, like, don't try to call it you're the warrior now or something. Just call it what it is.
If I didn't ask you this, because your answer a while ago certainly sent us off in a loop of videos. Time in the Shadowlands. So we've heard it goes a little bit funky, and we kind of noticed the heart of Oribos looks a little bit like the Nightwell. So we've been kind of wondering, you know, could we be gone for longer than we thought when we actually emerge from the Shadowlands? And the part two of that is when we go to Shadowlands, canonically, are we like cut off like we were in Warlords of Draenor?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like to take this opportunity to clarify a bit of what I said about time. And
Walk it back,
time.
Ian. Walk it back.
This is not a time dilation relativity kind of space where time moves differently. And I probably didn't phrase that as well as I could have or should have. I think the question that was originally asked was some characters that we may meet in the Shadowlands. To them, it feels like they have undergone a ton of experience since we last saw them in Azeroth.
Isn't that time dilation though? But wait, isn't that time dilation? I don't know, man. Not necessarily. Okay.
That work. And the analogy I was giving was that time is maybe perceived differently. Think of a dream. You might go to sleep for 6 hours, but in your mind, within that dream, you can experience time and many events that may span a much wider, range of time. But when you wake up at the end of the day, it's just been 6 hours. So that's more about how the Shadowlands are perceived by souls that go there, and the personal journeys of self-discovery that they may undergo. Someone who...
So it's the hyperbolic time chamber. Because they go in there and... No, they go in... No, think about it. So they go in there and then they perceive time to be way longer. And you guys remember back whenever we did the Jaina quest line in the thing, in Shadowlands, and she said that I've done it so many times before, and it was only a few weeks or whatever, probably in like the lore of the game of how long it's happened. So I don't know, man. It's so like this is I don't know, dude. This is weird.
Is brought to Bastion and becomes an aspirant within the Kyrian Order and rises in stature within that order. To them, that process may have felt like it took longer, but in reality, they only died 2 or 3 years ago canonically. That's the explanation there. It's not that once we're in the Shadowlands, it's like being inside the event horizon of a black hole, and every day in the Shadowlands is actually 5 days on Azeroth or vice versa. So I wouldn't read too much into the timey-wiminess of it, but as we go into the Shadowlands and encounter...
That means that they're going to have inaccuracies inside. They are planning for inaccuracies. Like, because there will be an inaccuracy, and they're just going to say, yep, well, it's the time's weird over there. Yeah, it's weird time. No, it's not dilation. It's something different. It's just this timey-wimey stuff. It's mysterious. How do magnets work? Yeah, that's right. Can't answer that, can you? All right.
Souls who are souls of the dead that had stories that we knew back in Azeroth, they may have experienced to them more than would seem possible within the months or years since they were last alive.
Cool. Yes, I guess that's an exciting storytelling opportunity for giving the characters who come with us and some of the older faces a lot of character development.
Yeah.
And then kind of clashing that against the old world that we ended up coming from.
Yes.
To sort of finish us off in a little bit of lore then, a few questions. So, Uther's Tomb. That was updated in Battle for Azeroth, and not a great deal has happened since.
Yeah, it doesn't.
So is that something we could maybe expect to see, perhaps in a pre-patch event?
I don't recall off the top of my head if it's featured in the pre-patch event. My recollection is, the tomb and updating it was we were already looking at the area.
They were just updating stuff already.
BFA, and
this was happening anyway.
A range of just side projects, little hackathon passion projects, where we'll have interns come in who are trying their hand at doing, work in the Warcraft style. And I believe it was just something that was done because it seemed cool. Like, genuinely, there was no deeper purpose to it beyond that. Though Uther certainly is a character that will feature prominently in Shadowlands storytelling, and particularly in Bastion. And for those who join the Kyrian, they'll learn more about his arc and what has come of him since he passed over into the Shadowlands. But I'm not sure if there's any direct connection with the tomb.
Cool. Well, that'll be a fun little project to have worked on.
Yeah.
So, moving us away from lore and over to gameplay stuff. So,
okay, here we go.
For the pre-patch, we've not heard that much about it yet, but what I'd maybe ask is, in style, are we going maybe closer to BFA, closer to Legion, or maybe Wrath in the direction the team wants to go with that?
He's going to say Wrath. He's going to say Wrath.
I think for the pre-patch, Wrath is probably the closest inspiration. It's definitely, kind of being built internally as like Scourge Invasion 2.0. We've been told that there must always be a Lich King, because if there isn't, then the Scourge, the Undead, will rampage across Azeroth. Well, we've seen the Helm Shattered. What does that mean? It means bad times for sleepy villages across Kalimdor and Eastern Kingdoms and elsewhere.
They're going to
so
die?
bit of dealing with that, while narratively, the forces and champions of Azeroth are mustering in Northrend and Icecrown to prepare for an assault on the nexus of all of this at the top of Icecrown Citadel, which is what's going to kick off our trip into the Maw and the expansion proper.
Which
also
makes sense.
Some loose threads to track down, like where's.
I think it's not. I didn't say. Listen, I said I'd shave my head if it was a Scourge expansion, not a Scourge pre-expansion event. Like, what do you mean? Like, that you guys are making shit up, trying to move the goalposts just to get... You guys just want me to shave my head. Like, there's nothing even about this beyond that. All you want to do is just want me to shave my head. Like, one of these days, I will actually do it.
Cathanos up. And what's he up to that we want to deal with during that pre-patch period?
Yeah.
Okay, nice. I think a lot of people, me included, are very, very excited with the idea of Scourge Invasion 2. I think for a more general one, before we dive into the sort of depth of endgame, content cadence. So, slightly different in terms of style with with Legion and BFA. Okay. Is there much of a plan going forward? Or what would we sort of be expecting in terms of cadence?
I think we're pretty happy with the patch structure we've really settled on since Legion, of these alternating .5 patches with more major updates that include things like new zones and a new raid tier, and the .5s are more either systems driven updates that refresh the existing content or evergreen
refreshing existing content. Ian, you need to stop fucking doing that. Just release the systems on their own. Like, you're just gonna go back, like, see, refresh. You know what? I hate that. I hate that the word they use. Oh, you think of refreshing? Like, what's refreshing? Like a spa visit where they put pickles in your eyes or some cucumbers on your fucking forehead? Like, this isn't refreshing. It's you having to do the same fucking dailies again. It's a fucking way worse, man. Way fucking worse.
Expansions to Warcraft as a whole, like a new battleground or expanding time walking, things along those lines. So I mean, I
think the patch structure of BFA and Legion has been good. Like, no meme, it actually has been good.
And we have a mix of, we're starting to plan out the big major beats of our story, places we're going to visit, what the next raid tier is going to be. We have ideas for what all those things are. Of course,
a little bit premature
to talk about them right now. But then a lot of the rest of our patches remain reactive to what we see as the game evolves and what problems need to be solved and what our players most need.
Yeah, cool. You mentioned time walking on that, because I just heard from another interview. It's probably mid this expansion will get Legion time walking. With there being loads of different time walking weeks, are there any plans to maybe consolidate them, like say doing 2 weeks at once or anything like that?
That's something that we don't have a specific solution for, but definitely realize that as the number of expansions that pool grows.
The thing is, like, that's not a big deal, right? I mean, like, this is not a big deal, but it's something that obviously it could be good.
At some point, if it's like months before specific time walking that year after comes back, that starts to feel too long. So we know we need to do something there, but I don't have a specific solution offhand.
All right, cool. So hopping into endgame then. Loot, right. So general philosophy, things have changed a little bit. There's no Titan forging, lower drop rates. So I'm kind of wondering then, there's a bunch of design space freed up. So what kind of stuff is planned there? Maybe more unique loot, like some of the things we saw in BFA, micro sets, a return of class sets, and essentially just an open-ended question of what is it like? What's it like with loot in terms of unique things you're going to be putting on it?
That's a good. All right, this is important.
So I think a bit of all of that. Class sets aren't something we're doing right away.
Right away? They're not something we're doing right away? Oh, shit. Oh, shit. It looks like we're going to get them back. I mean, like, they already said that? Well, just like him saying it again. Like, it's good that he's clear, like, saying it before. He says they're not sure if they're going to do it yet or not. I think this is the first time that he said right away. Like he said it in a way that implies that it will happen later. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's the first time I remember him saying it like that.
Covenant armor is the focus of our initial sets and that gear that you'll be obtaining in the initial Shadowlands launch. Though we have said that later on in Shadowlands, we explicitly want to return to class-themed sets. We know there's a lot of strong fantasy there, but also there's something cool about just the collection aspect of putting those set pieces
getting your
together
set together. Yeah, dude. Yeah, dude.
Yeah, I think things like unique effects, certainly some of the items that we've seen out of places like Mechagon, and I think of the Bit Band.
I like those.
There's
those
a lot
are
of
fucking
experiments
cool.
there that we're really happy with how they turned out. We're trying to
they don't get enough credit for the good things they do, and we give them too much credit sometimes for the bad things they do. I actually really like the Mechagon ring set. I thought that was cool. It's unique, it's interchangeable, and I find it awesome. So yeah, Blizzard actually has done some cool things with loot with Mechagon stuff. Now the bracers, not as much. Or at least besides the Fire Mage ones were cool, but I'm talking about the other ones. Those are not as cool. This is good to hear.
We want a baseline of items.
Crucible of Storms, yep, same thing.
But then enough layered uniqueness and twists along the way that you're not just getting into a very rote mindset of crit haste, crit mastery, and it's just the numbers getting a little bit bigger. Trinkets, mini sets, things like that are all ways of varying that core gameplay, making items a bit more situational.
That makes sense.
Making you want something because you have the other half of the set.
Yeah, of course.
Those are all things and tools that we plan to employ across Shadowlands itemization as a whole. We're also happy and excited to have legendary items coming back in with much more control on players' part over actually pursuing and obtaining them. And I think also particularly excited to have.
I'm not a fan that like everybody gets a legendary. You know what I mean? Like it's just like, okay, dude, how's everybody gonna get a legendary? It doesn't make any fucking sense to me. So I don't know, man. Like I hate that. I know. It's selfish. It is elitist. I think that legendaries should be elitist. What do you mean? Like it's a legendary item. Of course they should be elitist. Of course they should be reserved for like the fucking top 1% of players. Like, yeah. Fuck yeah, of course. Like you crazy? Like, yeah, like you saw somebody with the Illidan Wargwaves and it's like, wow, this guy's fucking awesome. Like, yeah, I mean, the thing is like just giving everybody everything is like such a terrible way of handling things because it means that it doesn't matter for anybody. Like just giving, everybody gets a legendary. Who gives a fuck about them then? They might as well not be legendaries. I don't know, man. Like, go play Classic then? That was one. The Classic was so easy. Everybody got a legendary anyway. It doesn't matter. I mean, like in Burning Crusade or even in Cataclysm, it's like it was hard to get a legendary. Only certain classes could get it. I don't like the everybody gets a legendary thing. I feel like they should be reserved for people that are like, me doing like heroic or mythic raids only. Or maybe like high-end PvP or something like that, like high-end mythic plus. Just like doing it to where like everybody gets one, I feel like is kind of, I don't know, like they're gonna do it. It doesn't really matter what my opinion is, but I'm just like giving it. I think that legendaries should be reserved for only like the high-end players, like they were in like BC and like Wrath.
Crafting professions gain a renewed, sustained importance in that ecosystem, which is something that I think really has been lacking in WoW for, frankly, like a dozen plus years. It's hard to go back and remember the last time that blacksmiths and tailors made things that were truly important and relevant at endgame. Like you literally have to go back to probably Burning Crusade. And here, if you want really powerful legendary plate gloves for your warrior, yes, you have the recipe and the rune crafting and the materials that you've gained from running Torghast, but you're going to need to find a blacksmith who is specialized in a very high-level glove pattern to make those gloves for you. You got to get them directly from the smith or get them off the auction house.
See, that's what I like a lot. Is if you're buying these things and you need to have somebody else that you talk to, and you have to buy the item from a blacksmith, so it incentivizes classes, or not classes, professions. So it makes you want to go and use another profession, etc. I think that'd be fucking amazing. I'm a big fan of that. They copied out. Well, I mean, like, I'm sure they've copied other. I mean, they've copied themselves. They had this back in the day too. This is nothing new at all. Like, I mean, really. You know how old it is? Fucking sulfurous. That's exactly how sulfurous works. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that, boys.
And that's going to be the template that turns into your legendary item.
Yeah, cool. I mean, all pretty exciting, I think, where that can all go. One quick little one before you finish on loot, and that is, how are you feeling on the quantity of random effects, like procs on the loot that we've got? And
that's
how that
a really good question, too.
The overall output, and maybe just the balance between those and on use.
So I think there's some interesting quirks there. Some of it is psychology. I've definitely seen no lack of screenshots of combat logs and, hey, look at infinite stars, look at gushing wounds as this % of my damage, and look how completely broken this is. And part of that is just because those things are expressed as their own damage source in the combat log, whereas they're not necessarily stronger than what you're getting from severe or masterful as a corruption, or what you're getting from your stats, or what a trinket that's giving you a bunch of primary stats is doing for you. It's just that is amortized across all of your other abilities, and it doesn't stick out as, hey, this item is doing this much for you. But unless
it's the discrepancy that's the problem. Like, what Ian is saying is true. What Ian is saying is actually true, but so there's like two compounding problems there. Like, number one is that there are certain classes where gushing is just better than like masterful or whatever. So it doesn't matter really what the other options are, because you're going to go with, like, for example, like Twilight Devastation or something like that. So it's better. But then also, like, what he's saying is true. But I think the problem that people have with that is the fact that it's such a massive amount. It's not just like a little bit. It's a massive fucking amount. And there's too many proc things overall. Yeah, it's the fact that, like, there are so many procs, and I think people want to see less procs and more base damage. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's at least where, like, my read on the community is.
Something we've definitely learned is that those sort of passive sources of damage, it's jarring and disempowering from a player perspective if I push my class ability and 3 separate things get triggered by it, and it feels like I didn't actually push Fireball. Like, the Fireball is almost irrelevant. It's a driver for all these other effects that are differently themed, and that's what's actually doing my damage.
That's exactly
But also, if the flat damage sources actually end up being the ones that are simmed or theory crafted to be optimal, that's probably a mistake on our part. Because by definition, like, those aren't really driven by player skill. They're just happening regardless of whether you're doing your rotation perfectly or suboptimally. And if they're the ones that sim the best, if they're the ones that perform the best when you're playing perfectly, then things like, if they're competing with stat bonuses that by definition aren't as effective if you're playing suboptimally, the stat bonuses just are always going to be the wrong answer. And I think ideally, the flat damage effects end up being something that's kind of a middle of the road option if you want a bit more simplicity, if you want something that's reliable. But the player in Limit, the player who's, you know, a top MBI competitor who's going to play as
he didn't say method. Oh, he didn't say method. So I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I like this answer. I think it's a good answer, but like what Ian really said earlier is that there's just like so many secondary, like, just unintentional damage sources that players are just like, it's like you're just along for the ride. The procs do the work and you're just along for the ride. And I don't know. I feel like a lot of people probably don't like that. Maybe that's just me, but I don't like that. I think that's dumb. Now, I want my abilities, because I think it feels good whenever you cast an ability and it does a lot of damage. Like that just feels good. And that, like, the stat amps, like I've said this before, right? I like the stat amps for corruption. I think they're really cool. And I'd like to see Blizzard do more things like it.
Close to the Sims as possible.
Some procs are fun. Yeah, some are.
They should want the things that are going to fully take advantage of that, and we should design and tune accordingly.
Okay, yeah. Cool. Just moving on to the rest of character customization. Part of what ties it all together is the Soulbinds, of course, and part of that is conduits. So I think a big community question right now is Covenants. From what we understand, they operate like gems. So if you put a conduit in and then you put another one in, the original one is destroyed. Yeah. So overall, I'm kind of wondering, like, if that is filling a sort of a similar niche to maybe like a major or minor glyph, but isn't really tied to a profession in terms of the economy and the need for scarcity. What would the team's essentially like design thinking or goal be in the consumable nature versus going for just them being items in your bag?
This is a great question.
Or maybe a library-like system like Essences.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the conduits are going to be earned from dungeon, raid bosses, PvP, vendors in some cases. Our current plan is for them to drop, not like Relics did where they compete with other loot slots, but as a bonus drop when they drop. So that should be an improvement over how things were back in Legion. But they feel like items. They do feel like gems. We're actually currently talking about putting a little bit of passive stats on them, even just stamina in some cases, to offset the throughput benefits that are coming from this system. And so there's a couple of reasons for destructibility. Because they feel like items, they feel like things that have stats on them, and thus like gems. If you could just pop them out.
And yes, we have seen this part.
Then the right way to play would be this really massive nuisance of inventory management, of having your massive collection of conduits off to the side that you're physically hoarding and swapping in and out.
What about the nuisance of having to get it again after you replace it? What about that nuisance? Like, I don't get it. Like, that's an even bigger nuisance.
That doesn't sound terribly fun. But a bigger philosophical reason is choice. What choice means in World of Warcraft, and what customizing your character means. We already have a ton of systems and decisions that you make on a very micro level, on an encounter by encounter basis, or when you're beginning a Mythic Plus dungeon.
Yeah.
You can change your spec, you can change all of your equipped gear, you can, within the Covenant system, change your Soulbind, which Soulbind you're going to bring, which path of the Soulbind is going to be active, which talents are active.
Yeah.
All of those things you can shift around. Then there are other things that are less mutable, like obviously your class, your race. Covenants themselves fall towards that end.
They want to make them a subclass.
And conduits within the Soulbind system offer much more customization and flexibility than Relics did, where if you were a Ret Paladin, your Ashbringer just had these...
Didn't I pause at this exact same moment whenever we watched this clip the first time, and I said, just because something is better than a bad system doesn't mean that it's good? Like, I did say that, right? Okay, well, I'm saying it again.
3 Relic sockets, and you really didn't have the ability to have 2 different Ashbringer loadouts. Whereas with Soulbinds, there are 3 separate Soulbinds in different paths within the Soulbinds. And part of the thinking is that that's where the permanent customization will lie. If the Nadia's tree, which we showed in the stream yesterday, which you can see in the build that you have access to right now, going down one branch of it, there's a duelist trait that is really emphasizing single target DPS that makes you do more damage to a single target that
We've seen this before.
It's likely that that's going to be an attractive Soulbind and Soulbind option for someone who is doing a single target raid boss encounter, and you're likely to want to put conduits in that line that synergize with single target damage. You might have a different line that seems to have more of an AoE type benefit, and you'll put AoE conduits in that one and respec accordingly before you go to a dungeon.
Yeah.
Or if you have utility survival perks in a Soulbind tree and you want that one active, you can have conduits synergized with that.
So they're basically making the Soulbinds like talent trees. That's pretty much what they are. A system within a system. Yeah, I'm okay with that to an extent. I just don't think the conduits should be destroyed. Like I don't think that adds any value to the game. It just makes things take longer, and it's just like an annoyance. Like, does this make gameplay better? No, it doesn't. I don't think that it will, at all.
Across all 3 Soulbinds, there's quite a few conduit slots.
I don't think you have to replace
These
them all the
aren't gonna
time,
be
though.
Ultra rare items. They'll be, generally available from a wide variety of sources, and we are loath to add like an extra layer of micro changes that you feel like you have to make, and that really, given the way theory crafting guides work, that you're supposed to make before you enter a given situation, where it's not just, hey, I'm going to pick my AoE Soulbind to go do this dungeon. It's, I'm going to replace and resocket these 5 conduits and then redo them for this other dungeon because of whatever reason.
But you can do that with all the other ones, though, like, besides those conduit points. I don't know, like, I feel like it's just one more thing that we're going to have to fuck around with. It's just going to be one more thing we're going to have to fuck around with. And I would prefer it to just be the essence system. The essence system, I think, is fine. Just let us decide and make decisions like that. Like, I think if they want to add more complexity, here's one way to add more complexity. Give us 2 extra ring slots and a class-specific slot. Like, give us some other shit. Like, it's like, give us more things that we can equip and put on our character. Like, I don't know why. Yeah, another fucking necklace, 2 chains, man. And make it a little bit more exciting than the same exact armor that we've had for the whole time. We've actually lost slots. We used to have relic slots and Libram slots and totem slots and ranged weapon slots. We don't have that anymore. Like, give us 4 trinkets. Like, let us do something interesting like that, Ian. Like, why the fuck do you have to create these systems on top of systems on top of systems that have these contrived acquisition methods that are just designed to extend playtime? That's what it is. That's why you don't want us to switch conduits, because logically there's no reason why you can switch conduits very easily and not the Soulbinds. It's just, I don't know, man. I don't know.
I suppose the worry is then, like, an add-on can just sort of do the whole thing in one click, really.
Yeah.
It's sure, the mechanical inconvenience is part of it, but yes, and anytime players are looking to add-ons to automate or streamline something, I think it's a sign that we've created a system that has, there's inconvenience and nuisance and too many individual decisions that all need to be made simultaneously that aren't actually interesting decisions. Like, it's just a template or a loadout that you're copying from somewhere and stamping in. Whereas I think the decisions of how you're going to customize your Soulbinds in a way that hopefully makes you a little bit different from other people, because these are the conduits that you happen to get, or stronger versions of them, and this is the build that you have gravitated towards that has these strengths and weaknesses, that there is a core of RPG customization that lies in those differences, as opposed to if it's just a checklist where everyone ends.
This is exactly what I'm talking about. The core RPG that they have invented in their minds, that's absolutely necessary for a game that's 15 years old, that's never had this before, that we need to have this in the game because Blizzard has created a false idol that now everyone has to worship. This is, it's stupid. There's no RPG, it's not necessary to an RPG to have this. Because if it was, then WoW wouldn't have had it for the last 15 years. it's so stupid to me, man. Like, I don't understand why they want it, why they're so fucking intent on this. They've sat there, as I said, they've sat there and they've convinced themselves that this is necessary for the game.
It's up ultimately being identical, and you're either following the right path.
And before I fucking go any further, these are the same people that convinced themselves that Warforging didn't go far enough, and they added Titan Forging on top of that too. They were so sure of that, and the player base didn't want it the whole time. Nobody wanted it. Nobody wanted it at the beginning. Nobody wanted it at the end. People said the reason why they didn't want it at the beginning, Blizzard said it was necessary. They got rid of it. Everything's fine. It wasn't necessary because people didn't want it. Fuck, man. And here's the issue, is that you're right. There are some people who will enjoy that. But the difference is that not having it will not make them not enjoy the game. But creating, it's like basically you're comparing a neutral effect versus a negative one.
Doing it wrong, and
I'm
there's either conformity or going your own way and thus doing it wrong. Nothing is really terribly interesting about that, and adding additional layers of those types of decisions don't really add much. They just turn into more chores that you have to complete in order to be optimal.
Yeah,
cool. That helps explain, like,
well, that's BFA right now. There's like a bunch of chores and things like that we have to do even now. Like, that's it's just a bunch of chores now. Like, that's exactly, like, his identification is exactly what it is.
What level the decision making, like, kind of is in the stack. If I was to do a quick little follow-up in Conduits, from my read of what you said, then if we're doing say like you're a tank healer DPS, right?
Yeah.
Would that be a situation where, because your Soulbinds don't change the loadout based on your spec, is that a situation where if you're a tank or a healer, you're going to probably have a Soulbind that you'll gravitate to, and therefore that's the one you'll spec, sort of in that manner?
That's kind of weird.
With your Conduit choices.
I think that's what they're doing.
That seems likely. I mean, it's going to be different depending on the exact types of content you're doing, if you're a hybrid versus a pure. But if there's one of the Soulbinds that offers more utility survival-based options, that probably isn't the one that you're going to gravitate towards for your ret spec, but you might for prot, and put synergistic conduits in it, and then that Soulbind and its loadout, in terms of which path you've taken through the tree, are saved and associated with that spec. When you respec from ret to prot out in the field, you just have the Soulbinds pre-slotted, ready to go, and you can do what you want, but it's the product of choices that you've made to build that out.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay.
If I was to move on to another aspect of the Covenants, weekly Renown. So this is something I've been pretty excited about since you guys talked about AP back in BlizzCon. So I've been wondering, how does the weekly Renown cap actually work? Is there maybe a way where it's throttled weekly in terms of player power, but maybe
is it like Valor
in other
points
ways?
or what?
And in some ways, it reminds me a bit of how I would have engaged with Mists of Pandaria Valor points. So on that side of the question,
good thinking.
Is there any sort of catch-up system for alts that we can maybe see sort of in the same vein as MoP?
Sure. So yeah, the way we're currently planning for Renown to work is each week in your Covenant, you have a couple of weekly quests that are to go and gather a certain amount of Anima, bring it back to the Covenant, and you'll get that Anima from a wide variety of sources based on your gameplay preferences across the 4 zones of Shadowlands.
Yeah.
Then also to retrieve some souls from the Maw, and those only come from the Maw. If you do those two things, you're optimal in terms of your Renown advancement. Any extra Anima or souls that you happen to get can go into accelerating more of your utility perks and benefits from some of your other
So it's not
Covenant
just the cap.
Okay. Or, healing your champions from your mission table so that they can go back out into the field faster. These are things that aren't directly meant to be power, but they're progression along utility and towards cosmetic goals and things like that.
Makes sense.
It can be a function of how much you play. I mean, we want the person who does play a lot to feel like they have goals to work towards, as opposed to just running out of things completely.
Okay,
which was, I
good.
think, a drawback of the way Valor worked in Mists of Pandaria. As a semi-hardcore competitive player, you'd quickly cap out on your Valor at the start of the week, and then if a friend was asking you to run a dungeon or something, you were probably only doing it out of the goodness of your heart, not with any possible gain for your character.
I don't know why they don't just do what they did back in fucking Burning Crusade. Back in BC, people would do Karazhan because you were able to use the badges that you got from Karazhan to buy gear to sell. All they need to do is create reagents for profession stuff that are needed, that you need to buy with these points. Like, that's all you need to do in order to incentivize people to do it. You don't have to create, like, this fucking, infinite progression system for people that play 40 hours a day. Okay? Like, you don't need to do that. You just add in other things that you can spend the points on that don't necessarily have to be player power. Player power should not scale infinitely. Because if player power scales infinitely, then everybody is expected to scale it infinitely. And then you have an issue where people decide when to stop. And I think that logically and psychologically, like, if you are making a decision to stop doing something, that is a decision that's made out of some sort of degree of apathy that you have for playing the game. And I think that making players make decisions out of apathy is not healthy for getting them to continue to play the game. So I don't know, man. Like, Okay.
In mind, and there's value when you feel like you can get something there. For catch-up, the system we have in mind from the start is if you are at all behind on Renown, like you're kind of below par, whether that's because
is it going to be like
alt,
Conquest
later on, you recently switched Covenants, you came to Shadowlands late, there will be other sources of Renown around the world that are just available as part of your regular activities.
So world quests.
You may have an extra bonus reward from a world quest that's up, or you might get a sigil that increases your renown from the chest at the end of a dungeon.
There it is.
And those will just give you direct accelerated catch-up until you get close to, where everyone else is.
I don't hate world quests.
Something we've tried to avoid is going down a path where catch-up just means we're removing gates, and catching up means you just have to do the same activity over and over and over again. Like, yes, it's better than being permanently behind, but I'm actually not sure if, saying, okay, you can just do 20 hours worth of questing nonstop to get caught up is really a great player.
The problem is this. Blizzard, every single patch has to catch players up. And there's no reason for them to have to do this. This is not, logically, there's no reason for this. It would make perfect sense. So, like, in BC, I always go back to BC because I feel like BC had pretty good in-game. And in BC, you would eventually stop doing Karazhan. You would not have to do Karazhan. You could come back and get, like, maybe one item or something like that. But, like, for the most part, like, you don't really need to do Karazhan anymore. And what's happened there is if somebody quit the game at the end of Tier 4 and they came back, 8 months before Wrath of the Lich King, they would still have to go through all of Tier 5 and all of Tier 6 and Sunwell. So they don't have to worry about fucking, I have to change this. Bellular is looking at me like that. It's making me uncomfortable. Just give me a minute.
Experience. You want
to... Okay, there we go. All right. Anyway, so it's too much. So you'd have to go back and you go do the old raids if you want, but you effectively had an entire expansion's worth of content. So, like, imagine it's like, so basically, this is the expansion. This is what I have a problem with in the game right now, okay? So we have, this is the timeline for the expansion, okay? So this is vanilla, or let's say it's classic, and this is Wrath, okay? This is Tier 4, this is Tier 5, this is Tier 6, okay? 5, and then 6. So if you stopped playing here, you would still have all this way to go. You could still go all this way. But right now, in the game, every patch, it basically does this. It just deletes it. So first patch comes out, this is gone. Second patch comes out, this is gone. Next patch goes out, this is gone. So this is what ends up happening. So what's better for the game? Is a long line better or is a short line better? I would argue that a long line is better. And that's what I have the problem with, is because Blizzard artificially, they kill their own content. Like, there's no reason to do the old deer. There's no reason to do any of this other stuff because they're just killing their own content. Long line is better? Yeah, because you have more things to do. They're invalidating their own content. And they're shooting themselves in the foot. Like, if somebody came into BFA right now, if they said, you know what, I want to start playing BFA right now, and they get into the game and they had to go through Old Deer, through fucking Battle of Dazar lore, do like a couple of Crucible runs, do Mashar's Eternal Palace, and then finally get into Ny'alotha, they're going to play the game for months. They're going to play for months because that's new content for them. Old Deer is new content. They've never done Old Deer because if they had, they'd have the gear for it, then they'd be able to do Battle of Dazar lore. Why do you even play it? Why do you even play the game? If you're just go to the last boss and kill the last boss, it's over. It's like playing a game with cheat codes. You just skip every level except for the last level. You're going to be done with the game pretty fast, and then you quit.
Make it so that you can just play the game, doing the types of content that you want to do, whether that's running dungeons or whatever else.
Yeah.
And make progress on getting your renown caught up to where everyone else is.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, cool.
Cool.
Covenant swapping. Is there any thoughts right now on what the cost of that would actually be?
So
that's a good question.
I think so the current plan is that leaving your covenant is simple and costless. If I join the Venthyr at the start when I hit level 60 and I decide, actually after a week or two, this isn't what I thought it was going to be, it's kind of lame, I don't like these parties or whatever, I want to join the Kyrian, I can just go to the representative of the Kyrian and join, and that's that. All the catch-up systems will be in place to let me quickly get ramped up and powered up in my sanctum over there. Now, where the cost comes into play is if I want to go back to the Venthyr for whatever reason. Effectively, narratively, I have broken a sacred oath that I made when I first joined them. They were a bit distrustful of me naturally, and I'm going to have to make it up to them. I'm going to have to prove to them that, yes, sorry, I actually regret my choice. I do want to come back. Please let me back in. And we haven't figured out exactly what the process is going to be there. We don't want it to be, it's kind of a balance between just...
It's going to be hard for them to make the decision and do it in the right way. And I understand, like, lore-wise, it does make sense. Lore-wise, it 100% makes sense. But I don't know if that's something that they should really make decisions off of and design the game around in terms of, like, lore. I don't know, man. Like, especially, like, game decisions. Like, it's like, generally, this is what I think. If a lore decision ever impedes gameplay or makes the gameplay worse, then the lore should not take precedence.
Frankly, a painful grind, which we don't really want to encourage, or just something that might take a couple of weeks, so that effectively you can't be switching back. It might be easy but time-consuming, so that you just can't switch back and forth from boss to boss or from tier to tier. Because again, the second you can do that, it's no longer a part of your identity. If you're committed to making a long-term change, we don't want there to be a significant barrier there.
Okay.
Whether it's because you want to see a different part of the story, or because you genuinely regret your choice, you shouldn't feel locked into it.
It's just because people want to swap because it's like, it doesn't have anything to do with that. They just want to swap for a better ability. Like, they just want to swap for a better ability. This is not... Jesus.
Now, if you do leave a covenant and do come back, all of your progress that you've made will be saved. All of your things you've unlocked, your Soulbinds, your Sanctum upgrades, those are all present and preserved. But really, the main goal is to make sure this doesn't turn into a system where the player expectation is that I go Venthyr for this raid boss, then I Hearth and respec to Kyrian for this next one, and so forth.
Yeah.
Because again,
cool.
What about the player expectation of going Venthyr for PvP, or going Kyrian for PvE, or Maldraxxus for something else, like I for Mythic Plus? Like I feel like, yeah, you have it for, let's say, for every boss. No. I just
have it on good authority that we are out of time.
Okay.
But thank you. It was a pleasure. I'm sure we'll talk again in the future.
Absolutely.
Good luck. I'm sure we've got a long day ahead of you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right. Cheers. See you later.
I don't get it. I genuinely do not get it. And I'm so frustrated about this, and I don't know what to do. Because I feel like I feel like there are people who almost like they want, this is the worst part about it, is I feel like there's a lot of people out there who they want to see like hardcore raiders get fucked. And because of that, they're willing to make the game worse in order for that to happen. And I've seen this happen many, many times. I don't know, man. I'm very frustrated about this. I'll be honest. I really am. I don't know really what to do about it either. It's just so fucking ridiculous to me. I'm very frustrated, man. Worst part of the Bellular can't change my decision or did not have an interview. No, Bellular is there to ask questions, okay? It's not a debate. Like, I don't think that the devs like having people on that like do interviews debate them. Like, if I had an interview with Ian, I wouldn't turn it into like a debate. I would just ask the questions and then get to another question. Like, that's the way an interview works. So like that's, if you don't like that, that's fine, but that is what the idea is. You would not? Well, maybe I'd say like one thing, right? Like, well, what about if this happens or whatever? Like, how are you guys going to prevent this from happening? Like, yeah, sure. But overall, like, they don't want to do the interviews and then just have the people that are interviewing them argue with them. Like, that's clearly not what they want. And I get that. I understand that. It makes sense, honestly. And there's more casuals and hardcore raiders, so they lean towards them. It's a business. Yeah, but this isn't leaning towards casuals. That's what I'm trying to explain. Like, making covenants non-swappable is not going to make casuals happy. This is an ideological decision based off of a narrative and a premise that they invented. It's not going to make, like, this is not going to make a casual experience better. They have invented this scenario and this problem to solve. They invented it.